Pittsburgh Steelers enter week 2 as favorites against the Denver Broncos. And if you want to get in on the action, Steelers are -3 right now. Head over to BetOnline.ag. They are today's presenting sponsor of the Bleav in Steelers show. Player props, over-unders, spreads. If you want to get in on the football action, BetOnline.ag is the place to do it. To get started, use our promo code Bleav. You can see that on your screen right now. That's BLEAV to get started over at betonline.ag. BetOnline, the game starts here. Welcome into the Bleav in Steelers show. My name is Mark Bergin. Very excited today to keep it in the Bleav family. We're going to welcome in Patrick Chiotti. He is the host of Bleav in Broncos, a little cross pod before this weekend's game between the Steelers and Broncos and what was supposed to be Russell Wilson's return to Denver. I mean, I imagine he'll still be there, but that's where we're going to start today's show. Patrick, welcome in.
Hey, thank you so much, Mark. Very happy to be here. And Broncos fans, we're really looking forward to this being the Russell Wilson return, the Russell Wilson revenge game, if you will. But honestly, after watching that game last week, I don't know if you can. Do it, but I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me on and excited to talk some ball.
Patrick, where I want to start this discussion is I always like to see what your enemies think. And as a Broncos guy, as a Broncos insider, a Broncos fan, who would you prefer to play Sunday from the Broncos standpoint between Russell Wilson and Justin Fields?
All right. Well, I'm going to put all the bias aside. I'm going to put all the last 2 years of my life watching this football team aside. And, I'm just going to be real. And especially after watching the game last week, I would prefer to play Russell Wilson in this situation. And there's a couple of reasons why. The first being the limited athletic ability of Russell Wilson at this point in his career. Yeah, he can still scoot a little bit, getting out of the pocket, but the calf injury has been a thing for the last 3 seasons, really. And it just it doesn't allow you to do the same things that I saw them do with Justin Fields on Sunday. Arthur Smith, hats off to him. He has done a really good job with the unique designs of the run scheme, and one of those being the design QB runs with a guy like Justin Fields. You just can't do that with Russell Wilson at this point in his career. So if I'm thinking about who I want to play instead, I want to play the guy who I'm going to be able to kind of keep in the pocket. I'm not going to be really worried about them, pulling guys and having him run up the B gap. And I'm going to take the guy who doesn't really throw that well over the middle. I know this is kind of a staple of Arthur Smith's offense, is being able to throw over the middle, and Justin Fields doesn't exactly have the best resume as far as that goes, but he's still younger, still room to improve in that aspect. So I think Russell is the guy that I would rather see them play. If Fields is playing and he's the guy that's starting, that's a little more concerning for me.
Yeah, Mike Tomlin spoke with reporters today saying that the team's planning to move ahead with Fields starting, and they're going to continue to monitor Wilson with what's a lingering calf injury. And I had the chance to talk with Dr. David Chow about this, of something that was an issue at the start of training camp, missed the first 10 training camp practices, and then something that kind of resurfaced, maybe re-aggravated it like Thursday of last week. And then it was like, okay, looks like Fields is going to be the guy. And Fields, I thought, outplayed Kirk Cousins in week 1 against Atlanta, didn't turn the ball over. Now you want to see some of those field goals converted to touchdowns, but his ability to scramble and keep the clock moving. Steelers had the ball for more than 35 minutes, and you force a defense to play an honest 11-11 when he's on the field, given his ability to run with the football. So that's something that really excites me for what he brings to the table, especially considering that the Steelers have injuries along the offensive line.
Yeah, and I mean, you brought up a great point. Having the ball for that long against a team like Atlanta, that's a great sign. Like, if you can just manage the game from that aspect, and allow your top defense to kind of work against a team that's still trying to learn and gel. That's a very positive sign. I think a lot of people were pleasantly surprised by how well the Steelers played offensively, just moving the ball down the field, taking those big shots when you needed to. I think that Fields did a fantastic job doing that. And I've had my own kind of doubts about Fields with Arthur Smith because of some of those things that we saw from Fields in Chicago. But man, he played a great game, moved the ball when they needed to, and put points up on the board and allowed his defense to finish off the rest of the game. I think that's, and watching Denver and Seattle for how long that defense was on the field. First half, they were playing lights out. Special teams and defense was combining for a really, really good game. It looked like the defense was just going to shut down the run game from that point. And then in the second half, it just kind of crumbled. And that happens when your defense is on the field for so long. So I fully expect them to really hammer home that mindset of, we got to move the ball, keep our third downs short and manageable, and let's just kill the clock. Let's just keep that defense on the field and strike them when we can.
Yeah, with Fields, only 1 3-and-out in Sunday's game against the Falcons. So again, you want to see some touchdowns, but keeping your offense on the field, I thought, was huge. And again, not turning the ball over. His MO coming into this year was, well, he holds the ball too long. Only took 2 sacks, and sometimes a sack isn't the worst thing in the world because you keep the clock moving to where he's not afraid to get rid of the ball too quickly. Incomplete, the clock stops. When it's not there, his ability to run the ball, I don't expect him to run 14 times every game. It's going to be hard to sustain that over 18 weeks. But I look at it like this too. Like, I really think that the Steelers are going to need both quarterbacks at some point this year. They played 3 last year. You look across the division. Lamar avoided injury last year in his MVP season, but the year before that, he battled injuries. Joe Burrow was hurt a year ago. The year before that, Deshaun Watson's been banged up in Cleveland. He's been injured, and so they had to go to Flacco last year. So you're going to need multiple quarterbacks at some point if you play in the AFC North. That's my point.
AFC North football, man, it's rough, it's tough. Like, you gotta have at least 2 starter caliber quarterbacks on that roster. I feel like a lot of teams, they have their starter and then they have their guy who can kind of manage games. Nah, AFC North, you got to have 2 guys that can start football games at least.
So interesting that you would rather play against Wilson. I think that's like always the truth serum of what your enemies think. Like, I almost liken it to like during the draft when it's like, oh, and your division rival got someone, you're like, man, I know that guy's going to be a stud. That's what I really look like. Because like whatever team you cover, you're going to be drinking the Kool-Aid of that team, right? But that to me is really telling that you'd rather play Wilson than Fields in this opening week game. And that's why we're doing this cross pod here.
Amen.
I want to talk about Russell Wilson's return to Denver because I'm a journalist by trade. It what keeps a roof over my head. And the storyline of Russell Wilson returning to Denver is fascinating to me. It sounds like we're going to be robbed of that due to the injury. Let me walk through the storyline. If I get any of this incorrect, hop in, Patrick, because ultimately I'll get to my question, but George Patton comes in 2021, becomes the GM, takes over for John Elway, who is beloved in Denver. Okay. So then he drafts Patrick Surtain II over quarterback Justin Fields in 2021, which at the time was controversial. Surtain's one of the best DBs in the game.
Yeah.
Trade for Russell Wilson with the Broncos in 2022. 2 first-round picks, 2 second-round picks, a 5th-round pick, Drew Lock, Shelby Harris, Noah Fant. They get back a 4th-round pick.
Yeah.
It does not work out in 2022. Offense, worst scoring offense in the league in 2022. You fire Nathaniel Hackett after a 4-11 start. Team finishes 5-12. You bring in Sean Payton. Last year, it doesn't go right. Sean Payton benches Russ towards the end of the season for financial reasons and owing him that contract. They have a release, NFL record $85 million cap hit, which they're still paying off. Ultimately, my question is this, is Sean Payton comes in. I understand the head coach works with the front office. why did Sean Payton have to do the bidding of George Patton, the people who made the decisions to bring Russell Wilson in? That was decided before Sean Payton got there. So why did he have to do their bidding last year publicly? This is something I've never understood.
Well, so let's take it back to when that trade happened. Okay. And where Denver was in terms of the franchise and, why they essentially felt like they had to make this move. This was a trade that was in the works for a few months. Denver felt like they were, we always heard the term a quarterback away because of the weapons that they had. They drafted Judy. They had Courtland Sutton. Javonte Williams looked really promising in his rookie season. You kind of had some weapons sprinkled around here and there. And you had an offensive line that you were pretty confident in and felt like could operate with a veteran quarterback. They hired Nathaniel Hackett as their head coach. And it was like, man, this is fantastic. We've got an offensive-minded head coach, and now we just need that quarterback. And what it really came down to was, are they going to get Aaron Rodgers from Green Bay since they hired Hackett, which was initially the idea. And when that kind of sailed, it was like, all right, we got to move on to our other target, which was Russell Wilson. And George Payton felt like Russell Wilson could still play at a high level. This was a guy who could still operate and do the things that they wanted to do. They felt like maybe this could be a match with him and Nathaniel Hackett, who was by all accounts a creative play caller. And that just kind of crumbled before it even got going. There were a lot of issues stemming from, him having an office at the facilities and all the behind the scenes stuff that was going on. Mm-hmm. But really what was going on was there was no continuity on offense. One week they're running one scheme. The next week they're running something completely different. Nobody knows what's going on. There's no just clear path as to, okay, here's what we're going to do week in, week out. And it created a bit of tension within the organization. George Payton is on the hot seat. You've got a new ownership group coming into town. They want to see results early. And so Hackett is fired. We get to the end of the season. That embarrassing loss to LA on, I think it was Christmas Eve, was kind of the nail in the coffin. So you bring in Sean Payton, a guy who has an offensive scheme, who is very detail oriented, who wants things done the way that they should be done, down to the last minute detail. And we saw this in New Orleans with Drew Brees and how they operated that offense for so long. And they come in and he has to hold Russell to this standard. Everybody else has to be held to this standard. Not one guy is over the other 52 on the roster. So Russ played better. He did considerably better than he did the year before, probably because of that offensive continuity and having it being just channeled into one lane. But at the end of the day, there were still limitations. There were still limitations in how he read the defense. There were still limitations in how he could call plays towards the end of last season. And this is based off of a couple of reports that we've seen in The Athletic and in other sources. There was just they couldn't expand the playbook anymore. It got to a point where they kind of reached their limit as far as what they could do. And by the end of the season, it was just kind of like they were playing backyard football. And Russ is going out there, the worst statistical team coming out of halftime and with their first drive of the second half, the worst scoring offense in the league in that standard. And that's hard from an offensive play caller's mindset, because you want to be able to expand your offense as the season goes. And they just couldn't do that. So those last two games, you brought up the money. It was a financial decision. If he did get hurt in those last two games, his guaranteed money for not just this season, but next season would be activated. They would have to pay it. That's tough. So they bit the bullet. They said, all right, we'll We're going to get off of it. We can't afford to do this for another 2 years. It wouldn't just be this season. It would be next season too, that he would have to be there. So Sean Payton said, enough is enough. I need to get a guy in here that can run my offense the way that I want it to be run, who can understand the meaning of detail. And so he did just that. He went out and he found his guy that he wanted. And now we just kind of play the waiting game to see if he really made the right decision. But from what I saw and what I watched of Russell Wilson over the last 2 years, I saw a guy who was just the shell of himself. I saw a guy who was maybe trying a little too hard to be the guy that he once was. Sometimes you just got to know when enough is enough and accept the fact that, hey, we have to run this offense a certain way. And if you can't do it, someone else can.
A lot of things. I wrote down notes because
it's a lot.
I'll go point by point. The quest to find that quarterback was trying to find the guy after Peyton Manning after you win the Super Bowl.
Oh,
yes,
Lord. Yes. It's been a long time.
Okay.
Yeah. The carousel memes are always great. You go from Trevor Siemian to
Osweiler,
Case Keenum, and then Osweiler, bringing him back, not just having him be there, but bringing him back after leaving. And then, you've got all these other names on that list. It got tiring. And so the quest to find that guy was really on the shoulders of Sean Payton in this last season.
At what point last year did you realize that it was going south in the relationship between Russ and Sean Payton? I know a lot was made of the clip of Sean Payton chewing Russ out on the sidelines. Was there anything even before then or even afterwards? And I know when all of this was unfolding to say, hey, Russ is going to be benched for the financial reasons, that was part of it. But when did you first notice that, Patrick?
Oh, man. I think for me personally, I kind of saw it after it was the Houston game, really. Like he had been playing fine. Like he wasn't playing out of his mind. He wasn't playing fantastic. You lose early games in the season to Washington and Vegas, and then the blowout in Miami, which I actually think Russ played really well against Miami. Surprising to say, but for me, it was the Houston game when this was a game. You're in the midst of a massive win streak. You beat Green Bay. You beat Kansas City for the first time in forever. You beat Buffalo in Buffalo on Monday night, a really tough game. You beat Minnesota, who was red hot at the time. And then you're facing a you beat a top 10 defense, top defense at the time in Cleveland. Mm-hmm. And you go into Houston.
Week 13 of last year, just to clarify for listeners and viewers, where you start out the season 0-3, that then becomes 1-5, and then doing live math here on the pod, you win 5 straight going into this Houston game week 13 a year ago.
This is very much a game where if you win this game, we're talking about playoffs. Mm-hmm. Like the 5-game win streak is it's getting there. Thank God we're at 500 and a game above. But you go into Houston and you really have a shot to win that game. And that last drive of the game, Russ misses a key shift in the play, which really threw off everything, and then tries to throw a pass to an undrafted free agent tight end. And it gets picked off in the end zone. It throws it in the double coverage and it gets picked off. A lot of misses in that game. And that kind of started to show, I don't think he really is seeing what he's supposed to be seeing out there. The timing was off. The rhythm was off. He just wasn't it was all kind of crumbling. And if you go back and you watch that 5-game win streak, the offense did not play very well during that streak. The defense was just playing out of their minds. Courtland Sutton is bailing him out week after week with fantastic catches. One in the Kansas City game and then one the next week at Buffalo. 2 of the most difficult catches of all time. And has the opportunity to beat Houston at home, just couldn't get it done. And I think that was we saw Sean Payton really upset in that game. And then it was Detroit. Detroit was the one where it just all came crashing down. He's getting yelled at, screamed at. He missed a call that, in a key moment of a game, you just can't do that as a veteran quarterback.
With Courtland Sutton, it's part of the reason we're excited. He's been in trade rumors with the Steelers and what the kids call the toe drag swag along the sidelines. So he was terrific last year. It seemed like every time I watched Broncos highlights, he was in them in one way or another.
Absolutely. Yeah. Fantastic red zone receiver, man.
So you mentioned Russ slowing down because the Steelers fans look at this and say 26 touchdowns, only 8 interceptions. We will take it in Pittsburgh. Considering Kenny Pickett a year ago had 6 touchdown passes for the entire season. His backup, Mitch Trubisky, had done that in a single game in Chicago. And he flames out in Pittsburgh too. So it's like, hey, we will take this on paper despite any shortcomings of, look, Father Time's undefeated. He's potentially, likely, however you want to phrase this, a future Hall of Fame quarterback. He's right on the cusp if he's not there. 9-time Pro Bowler, should be a 2-time Super Bowl champion, a 1-time Super Bowl champion.
Should be.
But you mentioned not being the same player. I look at his days in Seattle and Geno Smith taking over there, quickly becoming the captain there, quickly winning the locker room there, getting a contract extension there, of it just not being the same in Denver as what it was in Seattle. And he's on a 1-year deal with the Steelers where we're paying pennies and nickels on the dollar for what he probably would be worth on an open market. I think someone would want him to be potentially a starter, maybe a backup, if he's willing to accept that at this point in his career. And that's why this year's so huge for both he and Justin Fields. They're both on 1-year deals. Patrick, the Steelers are paying Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. I think I say this on every single show that I do on Bleav in Steelers. Less than $5 million combined.
What a steal. What a steal of a deal, man. So it's insane.
The positional value is outstanding by Steelers GM Omar Khan and company because, look, I don't know if you're going to win the Super Bowl. I can tell you you're probably not. But I look at what Fields did this last weekend against Atlanta, and Kirk Cousins was the highest paid free agent quarterback this last season. You don't think this weighs in the back of Fields' mind when they used to play each other every year in the NFC North? Are you kidding me?
Yeah. And this is a great opportunity for the Steelers to maybe find their franchise quarterback, like maybe find a guy that you can sign to a
even if it's a
extension.
Stopgap to be the guy before the real guy, because this is a team that's been in quarterback purgatory since Ben retired. And Ben at the end was a statue. He's a future Hall of Famer. He wasn't the same guy towards the end of his career. He played in the league for 18 seasons. That is to be expected. And that's the criticism of the lack of playoff success when you got to go back to January of 2017 for a Steelers playoff win. And it's, well, why is that? Why can't Mike Tomlin and company get it done? My point back has always been, well, who have their quarterbacks been?
Yeah. So, and that's like our last playoff win was Super Bowl 50, and we have been on the same trajectory. And it's like, when you look at the Steelers as a side-by-side, it's like, well, they were still able to at least get, winning records and keep this kind of same level. Like it's not glorious. Like you're not competing for, even a chance at the AFC Championship every year, but you're still considered a playoff contender at the least. And why couldn't we do that? We had one of the greatest defenses of all time, and a lot of those guys stayed on for a couple more years afterwards. You don't trade Von Miller until just a few years ago. Like this was a team that was still considered to be a quarterback away. But even if you're just a quarterback away, guys like Case Keenum should be able to take you to the playoffs. They should be able to do those things. Why couldn't it get done? We also had a list of head coaches. And There you go, Patrick. Yep. And I contribute that to be the biggest thing. When you have a head coach continuity and a head coach at the level of Mike Tomlin, who is not going to settle for, below mediocrity. Like he's not going to let it happen. That is the biggest difference between these two teams. And that's what, Broncos country has been fiending for a head coach that is going to take them back to the playoffs and is going to do so in a manner that this will last for a long time. Maybe Sean Payton's that guy, but we're only in year 2. Who knows?
Mike Tomlin is in his 18th season as the Steelers head coach. And I could say,
when he got
no
hired.
losing season. And how many teams would love to say we're at least 500 or better every single year. The stat that blows my mind during his tenure, Devin Bush in 2019, the linebacker out of Michigan, he's bounced around the league a little bit, was his highest draft pick at number 10, and they traded up to get him. The highest pick of Mike Tomlin's tenure is number 10, and you traded up for that. So if you never bottom out to get the top elite level talent, there was a clip of Tomlin several years ago where they were talking with Chase Young when he was still in Washington, and Tomlin's just laughing at him, and he's like, "We never draft high enough to get a guy that looks like you," and it's just the honest truth, man. And look, at the same time, the standard is the standard in Pittsburgh. It's a slogan in the 4-1-2.
Amen.
And that still applies to the playoffs. So what can you do to get back to that postseason success? Because Steelers fans are accustomed to winning the Super Bowl. They're used to hoisting Lombardi. So how you get back to that? Getting back to this week's game, though, I do want to ask you, I'd imagine Russell Wilson's going to be booed. Do you think it's just going to be relentless? How do you think he's going to be received this weekend when he's in Denver?
3 things that you can probably count on.
Okay.
The first being, and maybe you can't count on this, but if I were the one running the in-stadium entertainment, it would be my
I love
choice.
this.
You play future. You play exclusively future in warm-ups. That's number 1. Number 2, he is going to get booed. Whether or not he plays, he is going to get booed because the camera will show him no less than 10 times throughout that game. And I promise you, every time it's going to get loud. And number 3, they are going to count down the play clock because why not? It was such a big thing when he was in Denver with Hackett. Lots of games where they're just letting time go off the clock. I remember specifically going to his game, his return to Seattle, that season opener, and watching them burn 40 seconds of game clock, not even play clock, of game clock off in a fourth quarter situation where you have a chance to go win the game. That was that it blew the minds of every Broncos fan there. It happened numerous times. Even at home, it happened. So the play clock will be counted down. Those are my 3 things that are probably most likely going to happen.
For someone who doesn't know, Future and Ciara have a child together. I just want to be clear there. You can go Google that, and I'm just going to leave that there. But I will say this too. I think if George Patton is listening, if Sean Payton is listening, Patrick, I think you just got your job. I think you just got yourself a job with the Broncos.
I'll take it.
Mile high in terms of getting the fans riled up for this game. It's just your 3 things right there. Genius. Just sheer genius.
In all seriousness, this is, it's a home opener. It's going to be a huge game regardless. And if Russ was playing, if Russ was starting, it's going to be loud. And I can tell you right now, this is also it's Steelers Broncos. This is a kind of a quiet rivalry across the league. Multiple big playoff games. I remember watching the 2005 AFC Championship game that I will never forgive the city of Pittsburgh for that. And then, of course, us getting the revenge with the Tebow game. So there's been some really, really big games and matchups. This is a quiet rivalry across the league. And then you've got 2 just mega head coaches going at each other, and Mike Tomlin and Sean Payton. This is going to be a great matchup. Regardless, it's going to be loud. It's going to be ruckus. If Russ was playing, it would be even louder. And I can tell you right now, after watching the game last week and us going into this game this week, it's going to be quite the environment for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
All right, I got to ask you about a few Broncos, including Bo Nix, the rookie, making his second career start. No, it was a little bit rough in week one. That's to be expected with a rookie quarterback, but I know that Sean Payton is very bullish about him, which is why the team drafted him in the first place. It's going to be a tall task, though, against this Steelers defense, which in week one, if it wasn't the best defense in the league, I'd say top 3. So what are you expecting from him? And it's like, for me, I'd be like, let's rely on a Javonte Williams and trying to get the ball out fast, because it's going to be a tall order moving the ball against this Steelers defense. They have a relentless pass rush led by TJ Watt. But what say you for Nix going into his second career start, right from the frying pan, right into the fire?
Boy, we knew that this was going to be a tough schedule. Week one in Seattle, already a tougher environment. I've seen it for myself. And then you add in Mike Macdonald, a rookie head coach. Don't even care about that. That guy is a defensive genius. Really, really liked what he brought. And you know what? He did a lot of simple things against Bo Nix and still managed to get a ton of pressure on him. I wrote down some notes here. He was under pressure 43.1% of his dropbacks. And
so pretty much every other play.
Every other drop back, he was getting pressured. And having watched that game last week, Atlanta and Pittsburgh, boy, TJ Watt just getting home it seemed like he was back there every single time. I'm in the hospital room and, we're watching the game and I'll be talking to somebody. I look up, another fumble. Oh, who was it? Oh, TJ. Okay.
Well, half of them didn't count because of the referees. And I swear, I think this made Watt just angrier and angrier. And it was like, I don't care who you put in front of me. I'm going to make a play. And he gets the sack to end the game. But it was like each time it was like, no, whistle for some bogus penalty, which I'm a law of averages guy. I think some of those go in the Steelers' favor here in future weeks.
Yeah, and there was the one that I saw where he just ripped the ball from Kirk Cousins' hand. Looked a lot like Von Miller back in the day, and then the hands to the face penalty. That was a fine call, whatever. But I saw the other ones, and I would agree they were a little ticky tack. But that's the perfect way to describe my worry for Bo Nix and the Broncos offense in this game. You have got to get the run game going. They did not get it going last week against Seattle. Hats off to Macdonald. Again, that's a tough team to run against. You got Leonard Williams, Byron Murphy, Jerron Reed, like big dudes up front. And the Steelers are no different. Cam Hayward, Alex Highsmith, you're going to have to go up against. They've got a couple other dudes up front that are just monsters. And this run defense is going to be very good. That worries me because in order for you to have some pressure taken off of your rookie quarterback, you can't be having him throw the ball 42 times in a game. You have to get the run game going. Interesting note, he threw the ball 42 times, still ended up as the leading rusher for the Broncos. That's no bueno. We can't have that. So how do you get that going? Well, you're going to have to learn how to attack this Steelers defense any way that you can. Bo needs to get into rhythm. You can't have him just feeling rushed and feeling pressured every other play. That's just not going to get it done. And it's going to be a tough task. I don't even know if Garrett Bowles is going to be playing in this game yet. That's to be determined, but likely TJ is going to be lined up against Mike McGlinchey. I don't super love that matchup either. So that's going to be something to watch, but it's going to be just another one of those tough games. I will say Tomlin has been really he runs a lot of the same defenses and coverages. He's just kind of like, what I'm going to run.
And
now you got to beat it.
And it works.
You just got to beat it.
Let me piggyback off that too, because with other teams, when you look at star pass rushers, so I'll watch Myles Garrett or Micah Parsons.
Sure.
Those teams will move those players around to get a favorable matchup of, we're going to attack your weakest offensive lineman. The Steelers will occasionally drop Watt into coverage, but he always lines up over an opposing team's right tackle. And the reason for that is, and I'm honestly surprised more teams don't do this, most quarterbacks in the league are right-handed.
Yeah.
So when they drop back to pass, who's in your face, play after play after play after play, doesn't matter if you double or triple team him, because I've seen him beat it before. That's TJ Watt consistently off the edge. But the reason I think that they do that is, okay, we could attack a quarterback's blind side, or we could have someone with defensive back-like instincts on our defensive line who's also going to be just a total game wrecker off the edge. His skill set to just be a magnet to the football, it's really unlike anything I've seen from someone who is, at least on paper, an edge rusher.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, his play style, like just the explosiveness off the edge, his first step, his ability to jump snaps. I mean, I watched Von Miller in Denver for so long, and this was a dude who I see a lot of that in Watt. I see the athleticism and his ability to bend when he needs to bend, his ability to go through a tackle with a bull rush when he can. It's an awesome thing to see. You guys got an amazing player coming off the edge. This is a generational talent, and I hate using that term because it's such an overblown statement. But TJ Watt really is. He's got the blood, he's got the lineage. But man, his talent is just something that it's once in a lifetime that you get to see a player this good as a pass rusher and just all around as a football player. He's a freak. He's a matchup nightmare, man.
I mean, if he keeps up at this trajectory too, you're talking about a future Hall of Fame player. That's not a hyperbole either. I got to ask you this. So 2 players I want to ask you about on your offense is, if you lose this game, and if you need to sell before November's deadline, we still need a receiver. You could still send us Courtland Sutton. We'll send over a 4th-round pick. We can get George Patton and Omar Khan on the line right now. But, I mean, we've got George Pickens. We like George Pickens, Pat Freiermuth, tight end position. But the complement to Pickens, and I look at the stat line from week 1 where I think it's only 2 receptions for the next best Steelers receivers. That's not going to cut it when you actually need to put up points in different styles of play throughout the course of the season. But listen, man, I mean, if you need to sell before the deadline, a 4th rounder, how's that sound?
Well, here, I'll counter with this. It's tough because when you look at Courtland Sutton, you look at George Pickens, they're both kind of similar in what their position would be in the NFL offense, right? Like Pickens is a possession guy. He's a contested catch guy. So, bigger body, tougher receiver. He's going to be my X in an offense. And man, when I'm looking at a Z, Courtland Sutton just doesn't seem like a Z to me. He's another guy who's a big physical receiver. You can catch him at the sticks.
But hang on, Patrick. Hang on. Let's go back to when Arthur Smith was the OC in Tennessee. Who were his receivers? Who were his receivers in Tennessee?
He had A.J. Brown.
Corey Davis.
Yeah, and
both big receivers.
So, I mean, and also think about this. Tim Patrick, who was with the Broncos, he's a bigger receiver. They still played him at the Z. Why? Because he's a little more fluid. He's still got some juice to him. And now they have Josh Reynolds. And Josh Reynolds can also, he's also a bigger receiver, but he's also a little more fluid in his route running, still a physical contested catch guy. Yeah, I think, the Courtland Sutton Pittsburgh connection has always been kind of tied to Russ in this weird, pseudo kind of sense. If Russ wanted a reliable receiver that he knows and he has a relationship with, boom, Courtland Sutton. Why didn't they try to trade for Jerry Jeudy when they had George Pickens? Well, because that relationship just wasn't there at all. So Courtland Sutton, fantastic. And if that's the route they want to go, I feel like it does fit. Right. I feel like it does fit the Pittsburgh Steelers kind of offensive mindset. We're going to have just 2 big guys on the outside who, one of them is pretty fast. The other one is he's fine. But both of them can catch contested catches. Both of them can get to the sticks. Hey, we can run out of more 21 personnel. We can run out of more, we can do different things with those guys. Maybe they transition Courtland Sutton to a tight end. Who knows? But that's, I think in Sean Payton's offense, he needs an X receiver who is Courtland Sutton. I think it just he fits. Michael Thomas was his ex receiver in New Orleans, so that's how I feel. But a 4th round pick, San Francisco is going to give us a 3rd. You better up that offer.
I've been saying this when the Ayuk deal was coming down. My kind of price point was Keenan Allen to the Bears, which was a 4th rounder. Now, I know that's a 1-year rental, so the circumstances are different. I know Keenan Allen is older and has had durability issues, but that was kind of my litmus of during the Ayuk trades, the trade rumors with Pittsburgh, when New England was in the mix, when Cleveland was in the mix. It was like, that was my price point of, hey, where do you evaluate this with Brandon Ayuk? I want to ask you about Javonte Williams as well. Can Denver finally use him the correct way? When he was coming out of Carolina, maybe I saw that clip against, I think it was Miami on loop. It was one of the best, most physical runs where he's breaking tackles. And
the Baltimore game, when he broke like 6 tackles in one play.
Can we finally utilize him correctly? Because it has not happened since he's been a Denver Bronco, and I do not understand why.
Well, the ACL injury, his knee injury was really bad, and I think it was. That's fair. I think it was a lot worse than people thought. When last season, when Sean came in and he was still kind of coming back from the injury, he was not 100% to go, and there were a lot of reports like right before the season started that said his knee is not 100%. He might not be a go. And he got greenlit, got over 200 carries, and just did not perform very well. And when you watch the film, it's not so much that the play calls aren't good for him. Run him on a lot of gap stuff. Run him on they've gone to duo this season, which is fantastic. Love duo as a concept. And I feel like it works for Javonte Williams, but it's his eyes, dude. It's his eyes. His eyes are not where they need to be. He's missing a lot of key blocks, just not seeing the hole as well. Last week was interesting. I've seen some reports about the field being an issue for him, him not having the right cleats to play on that turf. I just don't.
I would think contract year, last year of his rookie deal, where it's like, let's go ball out and make some money this offseason. Like, that's my mindset going into this year in year 4.
You would imagine
coming out of Carolina, he was one of the backs we really liked. And it's like, I know it's like, well, what value does a running back have in the NFL? It's like, and you talk about helping out a young quarterback in Bo Nix. To me, it's helping getting the running game going, getting swing passes out of the backfield. The running back's going to be like the quarterback's best friend.
Yeah. And, this is a great point too, because they tried to do that a lot with him last year. And the problem was, like, he would get these passes and they would either just, he would drop it, and then everybody's like, oh my God, he can't catch out of the backfield. The quarterback on swing passes out of the backfield, anytime you're running those plays, you have to be able to throw that upfield. That has to go upfield, because that's where their trajectory is leading them. If you go back and thank God for NFL Plus, because now we can do this. Go back to last year's Broncos offense and go watch every single one of those targets for Javonte Williams and look at where the ball goes. They're low. They're behind him. It's just not like he's not going to get anything with that. So I would love for them to do that a little bit more.
And it's the checkdowns too, where Russell Wilson, now he is in year 13, it's, hey, let's check it down. Let's play safe. But there's times where you're playing behind the chains in that regard too, where, oh, this looks great and it pads the stats. At the end of the day, it doesn't actually help you win or lose, where you have to be. Look, I'm glad Russell Wilson doesn't turn the ball over, but you have to have some risk when you're playing the quarterback position.
Absolutely. And I think like Javonte needs to get his eyes better because that run game is going to be so big. And we saw it a few times in Seattle. They had some great duo calls, some great power calls. Audric Estime had a couple huge runs. And Jaleel McLaughlin was able to get off a couple of really great runs as well. We want to see Javonte get back to that, because he is beloved here in Broncos country. And we know that he's going into the last year of his deal, and him getting over 200 touches last year is massive. Really want to see him get back to being productive. And is he going to do that this week? I don't know. It's going to be tough.
No, on the offensive side of the ball, Josh Reynolds, Greg Dulcich out of UCLA too. We really liked him at the tight end position. I want to go to the defense, though. I mentioned Patrick Surtain the second. Who else should the Steelers keep an eye out, or just to say, hey, we have to game plan for that player? It could be Surtain or just anyone else defensively that, as a Steelers fan, you should keep your eyes on come Sunday.
Yeah, Jonathan Cooper. That's the first name that's going to come to mind. Outside linebacker. Justin Fields knows him very well. They played together at Ohio State. 7 pressures last week against the Seattle Seahawks. 29.4% win rate on his pass rushes. Dude, for a 7th round pick, this guy has absolutely outplayed his value. He's a really good edge setter, probably the best edge defender that the Broncos have. Yeah, we can mention guys like Baron Browning and Nick Benito and the rookie Jonah Ellis out of Utah. Man, yeah, that kid is going to be must-see TV here in a couple seasons. But the only other guy really who's coming to mind is Zach Allen, the interior defensive lineman. Came over from Arizona last season. He was one of those big-time acquisitions. This dude has been a monster inside, really good pass rush from the inside. Slept on run defender. PFF gave him a really bad run game last week, even though he was causing havoc. 2 safeties in that game. Come on, what are we doing here?
I thought they might set the record because they both happened before in the first half. So it's like, how many I don't know what the record is in a single game, but it was like two safeties.
I don't even think I've ever seen 2 safeties happen in an NFL game before. That was insane to me, let alone in the first half. So yeah, Zach Allen is really the only other guy on this defense that is going to keep me up at night if I'm a Steelers fan. The Steelers offensive line, though, when I was going back and I was looking at some of these grades from last week, boy, the interior line just did a fantastic job. Broderick Jones gave up the most pressures, but it wasn't even that much. They did a very good job protecting Justin Fields against a pretty solid defensive front in Atlanta. I thought this was going to be a game where maybe they struggled a little bit. No, they did fantastic. So it's going to be a challenge for the Broncos on both sides of the ball. Zach Allen's going to have to get interior pressure really well, but they're going to have to play the run game much more disciplined, especially in the second half. They did not do well with making adjustments going into the second half. They held Kenneth Walker to 21 yards of rushing in the first half last week, 84 yards in the second half. So it doesn't help that your offense went 3 and out 6 straight times, but point remains, you got to be able to adjust, got to be able to play more disciplined. So, hopefully they can do that. But yeah, Jonathan Cooper, Zach Allen, PS2, those are going to be your guys to watch on the Broncos defense.
One thing I want to make mention too is the Steelers are going to have a new punter this week in Corliss Waitman. Cameron Johnston looked like he left the game with what might be a season-ending injury. Mm-hmm. We were very excited about that because someone who could flip the field, punter is a position where the Steelers have had big inconsistency the last few years. Yeah. It's not that Presley Harvin III, a guy that they drafted out of Georgia Tech, that he didn't have the ability. It was just the consistency of it. So it's not just the punting game, though, Patrick, that I'm a little bit concerned about. It's also the holding game. And you're coming off a game where Chris Boswell had 6 field goals. And if he's not the special teams player of the week, I don't know who would be, because you have 6 field goals, including 3 from 50 plus. And then he was the emergency punter. He had a 43-yard punt in a crucial part of the game and didn't miss a beat. So it's like, special teams is a big part of any Sunday. I mean, I look at other games too. I look at, say, the Bears against Tennessee. The Bears don't even score an offensive touchdown in Caleb Williams' debut, and it was a pick 6 and a block punt, both touchdowns, that's able to put Chicago over the top in that game. So does the new punter have any impact in this game? I don't know, but what I do know is that I was very excited to see Cameron Johnson to be able to flip the field and be able to help this team out in playing what you just mentioned earlier too, which is complementary football. We don't talk about it enough, or if we do, I know it's considered a cliche, but it's very important. It can be the difference between winning and losing in the NFL.
Well, and this is also a really smart move by Mike Tomlin and the Steelers, because not only are you bringing in inexperienced punter and experienced holder, but you're bringing in a guy who has experience punting at altitude. This guy was in Denver for I think two seasons, but he's got experience. He knows how to kick at this level. A lot of guys hear about punting, in Denver, kicking in Denver, like, oh, this ball is just going to fly. So Corliss Waitman has the experience in Denver, punting in Denver. So really smart move here by Mike Tomlin and the Steelers, bringing in a guy who's familiar with the altitude, can play at that level. And he's not terrible. He's pretty good. We watched him for a season, and I think we felt okay about him, but they brought back Riley Dixon, and he's been playing great. That's going to be one key where the Steelers really need to make sure that they're on point, because last week the Broncos special teams, they don't get those two safeties without the special teams unit. The punt team was fantastic in getting downfield. They were gunning down, and of course, the term for the outside guys is gunners, but they were gunning down the field and they were making plays, and that's huge. Kick coverage was fantastic, and I think that's going to be a really big determining factor. Can you put Justin Fields and this offense inside the 20-yard line consistently? Can you put him inside the 10-yard consistently? I think that's going to be a really big point of emphasis for the Broncos special teams this week.
Yeah, the field positioning, especially when points can be a premium, and a Steelers offense that struggled the last several seasons. And you've got a rookie quarterback with Denver. Waitman, the Broncos punter in 2022, played in all 17 games that year, and then played in 2 games for the Steelers in the 2021 season. So, Patrick, this has been terrific. If there is anything that you need to plug over with what you're doing at Bleav in Broncos, and hang on, before we do that, I saw that you interviewed Jake the Snake Plummer.
Oh,
what was that like, man? I got to ask you about that, because I was listening to a little bit of the podcast.
Yeah. Jake, I told Jake before the show, and it was a random, like I just mentioned it on Twitter, talking about rookie quarterbacks and stuff. And I just mentioned him in one of my tweets, and he said, yeah, hell yeah, I'll come on. And I told him, you were the guy that I was pretending to be out on the blacktop playing football. Like that was the era of Broncos football that I really grew up in. And like I said, 2005, I'm never going to forgive the Steelers organization from that, because they absolutely would have beat the Seahawks that year. They were losing that Super Bowl regardless. Jake was a big hero of mine, and his story is one that is just so awesome. His relationship with Pat Tillman is great. That episode, just if you've never listened to our show before, that is the perfect one to start with. Jake is one of a kind. That dude is awesome. He's got mushroom businesses going on. They're fantastic. I take some of the products as well. I'm not getting paid to say that. They're fantastic. But just an amazing conversation. I teared up a couple of times talking to him, and, they say never meet your heroes, but man, I'm really glad that I met that one.
You mentioned just the ties of just, what you grew up watching. That 2005 season in that AFC Championship game against Pittsburgh. My co-host Ike Taylor intercepted Jake the Snake Plummer in that game to the Super Bowl. Did. But the flip side of that is when the revenge game against Demaryius Thomas, it was Ike who got stiff-armed. And look, people at Pittsburgh still say it's like, well, if our safety would have been healthy, this wouldn't have been an issue in overtime. The fastest overtime game in the history of the league. So there's two sides to every sword, my friend.
Yeah, rest in peace to DT. One of the most iconic football plays of all time, and another just genuine human being. That guy was amazing. Both those guys.
That
fantastic.
Whole season,
I can't believe it happened.
I was in college, and we would get back, and First Take would be on, In First Take, it would Stephen A. and Skip Bayless. And
yep.
they were out drawing the ratings on the show was on ESPN2. It wasn't on main ESPN.
Yeah.
And the ratings were better on ESPN2 just with the debates that they would get in. And Skip's infatuation with Tebow that year was just man,
he was not a good quarterback. Let's be clear. We have this argument in Broncos country all the time. He was not a good quarterback. That was one of the worst passing offenses of all time. But he could lead a team, and that's what he did. And having been able to talk with Chris Harris Jr. for so long, and kind of learning about what type of player that dude was. Look, they would have rode for that dude every single Sunday, even if it meant they threw the ball 5 times. They were still riding for that dude.
And it was that year. I'll just never forget it. I remember they had a game against the Bears where Marion Barber ran out of bounds, and if he stayed in bounds, they wouldn't have been able to stop the clock.
And he fumbled the next play, I think.
Denver gets the ball back, and the game was at Mile High. So whoever the kicker was knocks in a long field goal to win the game, and it was oh man,
it was that was a magical season, and for DT to do that. And that was another time where the Broncos were kind of in this quarterback, this weird space. You go from Jake Plummer, who led them to an AFC Championship game, to then Jay Cutler, who was at the time the highest quarterback ever taken by the Denver Broncos. And then the head coach that you bring in just trades him away. It was ridiculous. And so then they were caught in that limbo again. And that was a big moment for them, big moment for the city. Rest in peace to Demaryius Thomas, man.
You've had you've had some good luck with the quarterback position. I mean, Elway, Peyton Manning. So it's
Briscoe before that. Yeah.
We'll see if Bo Nix is the guy. Bo Nix is the guy. If there's anything you need to plug, Patrick, with Bleav in Broncos, the floor is yours.
Yeah, just go over and check out Bleav in Broncos. Times have been a little weird with the baby coming and everything. But we do game previews, game reviews. The off-season content never stops. So go over and check that out. You can follow me on Twitter at Patrick Chiotti. That's Chiotti, and you can find all of my content over there.
Patrick, thank you for your time this evening. And if you've enjoyed listening to Bleav in Steelers, go leave us a 5-star review, Apple and Spotify. Thank you. Today's presenting sponsor, BetOnline.ag. If you haven't already on YouTube, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. I will be supposed to be back later this week with my co-host, Ike Taylor, getting you ready for Steelers and Broncos. I'll also be back immediately following Steelers and Broncos, sharing live reaction from the game. Thank you again to Patrick Chiotti. My name is Mark Bergin. Thanks so much for watching Bleav in Steelers. I'll see you next time. Until then, take care. It's so long, everybody.